We hope you enjoyed your little break there. Welcome to this session, the 2025 Northwest ILL Resource Sharing Conference. Of course, you know today now is September 8th, the year of 2025. So this session is titled Resource Sharing as Research Support, a collaborative project to support bulk ILL requesting. Our presenter is Mia Partlow from North Carolina State University Libraries. This session is being recorded with permission from the presenters. We plan to make the recordings available once our captions have been completed. Expect an email from Huva when they are ready for you. We're targeting 3 weeks for those. We'll take questions at the end from the room and from our virtual attendees. Our virtual colleagues should post their questions into the Huva Q&A. And don't forget to upvote your favorites. After the session, please complete the survey 1 to enter our prize drawing, which is open to all attendees. And I believe it's conference registration for next year is the grand drawing. I'm not 100% sure, but you'll find out. And anyone in the room is logged into Huva. Please remember not to start this presentation on your device. Okay, and now I will turn the session over to our presenter, Mia.
Hey everyone, you'll notice 2 names on the slide. Kristen is sick and she had to miss the conference, which is disappointing, and I will try to do my best. I will present her slides and try to do my best to answer any questions, but of course I can connect you and her if you wanted to go into any more detail. All right, so today I just want to talk about our agenda. We'll talk about our environment at NC State, our goals for the bulk ILL project, and what I mean when I say bulk ILL, the collaboration and development process between Kristen and I, our pilot phase, which we've just finished, and where we're planning to go from here on this project. So for posterity's sake, there we are, my old headshot. I'm Mia, I'm the resource sharing librarian at NC State, and Kristen is our discovery systems manager. So she oversees our ILS and interlibrary loan systems. All right, so our environment at NC State, for a little context setting. We use ILLiad as our primary resource sharing system. We use Rapid ILL and IDS Logic for automation, and we use Reshare for consortial borrowing. So Rapid ILL and IDS Logic give us a lot of, as I said, automations that we're able to leverage for this project. We do about 22,000 requests per year, good old ARL statistics. And we have 4 full-time ILL staff, which also includes our lending coordinator. All right, so bulk ILL. When I say bulk ILL, I mean we are taking a file that could be hundreds of citations and placing all of the requests at once in bulk. Our goal for this project was, at its core, to support librarians and researchers. When I started my job as resource sharing librarian in February of 2020, foreshadowing, I got this email from our librarian in the veterinary medicine library, right, a health sciences library. I was up until 2 a.m. submitting ILL requests for a systematic review, right? Submitting them one by one. There's got to be a better way. It's like, oh, okay, day 3 of the job, here I go. My gears start turning. So first, I did help her, figure out how to create an open URL from her citation manager, which was EndNote, to get those kind of, auto-completed ILLiad request forms. But, that's still pretty manual. So I had been learning and hearing about the ILLiad API, and I thought, okay, data in a citation manager is structured, right? It's ISSN is this, publication title is this, article title is this. And if we can get that structured data into ILLiad, which also requires structured data, we could, using the API, we could potentially place a request. Right. And so that was the impetus, right? So this project was born from the needs of our librarians who were supporting researchers doing systematic reviews. They were on the systematic reviews team and collaborating with those researchers. And I wanted to help them do their work more efficiently so they weren't tearing their hair out. All right, a brief aside. What is a systematic review, right? I want us to all be on the same page. So a systematic review uses detailed systematic search strategy. It's designed to provide a complete, exhaustive summary of current evidence, could be published or unpublished. And this process includes reviewing potentially hundreds of article abstracts using a certain set of criteria and narrowing it down to a set of articles for full text review. For larger formal systematic reviews in the health sciences, they might use a management tool, which on our campus, we use one called Covidence, to track progress and things like inter-rater reliability to make sure everyone's using kind of the same criteria in the same way. So they can be smaller or complicated depending on how the researchers are approaching them. And typically they require, for formal systematic reviews, do require kind of librarian support to craft those search strings for them. At NC State, we have seen a rapid expansion of librarian involvement in the systematic review process in the past 5 years. And it's not purely systematic reviews, right? Not the formal only. We also see literature reviews, scoping reviews, and class projects that involve reviewing, hundreds of citations. So those could be called systematized reviews. And I want to thank our subject librarians, Dave Provost, Sean Bennett, and Christy Borda, who helped me understand the landscape at NC State, but also are working really hard to kind of enhance our services in this area. All right, so just like any service and any new service that you want to start, swirling around is the librarian and researcher kind of context, right? And so let's look at researchers first. For years, I would get emails from researchers with, a document says, hey, can you place these requests for me, right? There was an expectation that we would have the ability to just generate requests from a list of citations. We always had to say no, or in a really special, unique cases, we might have one of our student colleagues kind of help place those requests manually. But again, that's just somebody entering information directly into ILLiad. The second part of the context that I was thinking about for this project is, yes, it is possible to kind of connect a citation manager to your article knowledge base and generate those open URLs so you get those nice pre-filled request forms. But that essentially requires librarian support to set that up. And only a really small number of researchers are going to do that. And even at that point, you're still placing the requests one by one, right? Search for the article, find it, click the link, submit request. And the last thing that I realized is maybe the hardest part about supporting systematic reviews from the ILL perspective is that if they're using a platform such as Covidence or another kind of management tool to manage their citations and review their abstracts, researchers they're going through all the abstracts and then they get to that full text review stage. And at that point, those citations have been completely abstracted from any library holdings, right? And so in order for them to do any sort of full text review, they have to essentially do whole new searches for every single citation they want to review. They don't know whether we own it. They don't know if they need to ILL it. So there's this real, like, what am I supposed to do now feeling, once they have their full text review list. And so those are all really, I think, to me, interesting challenges from the researcher point of view. On the librarian side, I wanted to remove the burden of placing every request for individually. Though I think somewhat understandably, a lot of that responsibility is falling to librarians on these researcher and collaboration teams for systematic reviews, but I didn't want them to have to do that. So I wanted to remove that burden. And additionally, I wanted to take their workflows into account when creating functional requirements, right? How closely are they working with these researchers? Are they in the citation manager? Can they export, the citation file for us? Or do we need to kind of have some educational material to help researchers do that? And kind of in companion with that, we want to establish the appropriate level of mediation, right? Do we want it to only go through the subject librarians, or do we just want the researchers to come directly to ILL, right? So those are some open questions we had when embarking on this project. So a little bit about our development culture at NC State. Openness to grassroots ideas is one of the strengths of NC State Library's culture. At our library, ideas come from the people who work directly with users, which helps to prioritize work that we know will have an impact. And this is what I find really satisfying, is that our goal is to have something to work with quickly and see how it works in the real world. And if it's successful, we can grow the idea from there, right? So start small and get something working. All right, so with that in mind, this is a screenshot of the first prototype that we created in spring of 2020. So I had that question from the librarian who was up until 2 a.m. I reached out to the head of our digital library initiatives department. That's a department of developers that help us solve library problems. And he latched onto this. He said, okay, yeah, I think this is something that would be a really great research support enhancement, like for interlibrary loan. So let's get to work on it. This is a screenshot, as I said, of the first prototype. And the tool you might be noticing with the kind of interfaceness of it was designed to be user facing. The original tool was designed to let users upload a package of citations. It would search the library database for full text access and then search unpaywall for open access. And if both of those failed, we would send the requests into ILLiad. It also provided the ability to get a package of the PDFs so that we could import them into Covidence later. This was the progress that we made in spring 2020 to get this spun up. We just were kind of testing the waters here, seeing where we wanted to go. But of course, other pressing issues related to getting students textbook access during library closures and shutdown took precedence. And we actually had to set this project aside for a couple of years. And so when you see the final product that we have now, it's quite different, and I'll explain why later. All right, so when Kristen started, these are Kristen's slides, so I'm using the third person a bit more now. When Kristen started in our digital library initiatives department, her boss, the department head, told her about their previous work in this area of bulk ILL and suggested that a simpler approach might be a way to meet this need faster, right? Not all of the multiple checks or the user interface. Let's strip it down a little bit. So Kristen was learning Python, and she thought the project, might be within her skill set. So she and I worked together to come up with this list of minimum requirements. So we wanted a staff mediated tool. That means one of us is placing these requests. We want to validate each request. We needed to support physical and digital loans. We were going to submit every request to ILLiad. We wanted to work with a CSV or an RIS file. And RIS is kind of a citation manager structured data format. And we wanted to, return transaction numbers or errors so that we could track, how each import went. We thought that we could meet this need with just a Python script rather than a full web application. So a little bit more about the technologies we chose for this project. Python is a popular programming language, relatively easy to learn. according to Kristen's slides. And there are lots of resources for learning it. And the one thing that she didn't add to these slides, which I'm going to add, is that Kristen is super talented and she spun this up so quickly. And I was just blown away and so excited because I've been waiting years to see this happen. All right, and then she also used a Python library called RISP for parsing RIS citations. It takes citations in RIS format and turns them into structured data that Python can work with. And then we used ILLiad Web Services as a set of APIs that Python can use to interact with ILLiad, from that external program. So submitting requests and validating users. All right, so this is the script, right? So the tool we developed is a Python script that can be run from the command line. The script name is billy.py. It calls the program, which you kind of download from GitHub and install into your computer. The external ID is for us, it's our user email address in ILLiad, and it just identifies the user for whom we're placing the requests. So we can place a request on behalf of anyone. And you could also use the primary ILLiad username with some minor changes to the code, but we did it this way. It's just a little bit more straightforward. The citations.ris, that's the file name. So, whatever your file is, it has to be an RIS or a CSV and placed in a kind of a specific folder within the kind of code folder. And then we've got our pickup location, which can be like a set of configurable locations inside the script. And that's only if you have, physical items, of course. And then this -t at the end, that's test mode. So you can run the script in test mode and see the results, on the screen, see how it does, which is really helpful for me when I place a request. I always do it in test mode first and just give it like a really good once over. But it's also really helpful for development when we're adding features and trying things out. So you're not, even if you're doing it into your development environment, you don't really need to be adding like hundreds of requests at a time. You could just use it in test mode. All right, so here's a little bit more detail about how the script works. The validate step first, we check the file type. Is it an RIS or CSV? We check the presence of a citation type column, which indicates that the file is structured correctly and that we'll be able to recognize the transaction types that kind of need to be used in the transaction. And we use the ILLiad APIs to ensure that the user is valid and not blocked. Now, the thing here is because this is staff mediated, we can always make sure that there is an ILLiad user to begin with. But this extra validation step, ensures you didn't add a typo to the email address or something, essentially. All right, the build stage maps citation types using a custom mapping file. And I'll tell you more about that later. It's really interesting. It creates ILLiad transactions in JSON format, which is structured data that Python and the API can parse. And it flags any missing data. And we are pretty liberal about this. So we only require the user ID, request type, process type, which kind of gets sent along with every transaction, and the pickup location if it's a physical loan. There's so much variation that honestly, even requiring title and author kind of resulted in some errors. And so I'll talk more about the data cleaning process that we use in a bit to kind of front load some of that data validation. And then the submit step, we use the APIs to send the transaction to ILLiad. And if it's successful, we receive a list of transaction numbers and the associated citation data. And the user will see the request records in their account immediately. And from there, every request is just processed as a normal ILLiad transaction. Nothing special about it after that. This is the CSV file, that's the results file that lists each transaction along with any errors and the transaction ID. So, if it was missing some data or, I don't know, something else, other error, we could see it there and help troubleshoot and kind of put that request back in if needed. It's really helpful for larger files. And it's also helpful for me because I actually just send this back to the researcher and say, okay, here's a list of transaction numbers and your citation. And that kind of hopefully will help them keep track of things a bit. I'll talk a little bit more about some of our specific technology solutions that we're using. I mentioned the RISP library before. It has worked really well and is really easy to use. The example on the screen shows how it creates structured labels and values that can be read by Python. And this could be useful in other academic contexts. And it really shows the value of the Python community. Like, this is an extremely specific library that is exactly what we needed. It was really cool. And so the only downside of this, kind of building this into the script is that the citations we get aren't always in RAS format. And so I'll talk later about some more ideas we have related to this. All right, format mapping. So one of the challenges that we ran into during testing was the large amount of variation in citation types assigned by different providers. Users download citations from databases, from the library catalog, from WorldCat, et cetera, and they're all different. They all kind of give different types to maybe a similar thing, right? So in the on the screen here, the RIS_type value there. So you got JUR, JOUR, magazine, e-journal, right? It's all a journal article from our perspective. So the mapping that we created correlates RIS citation types with Zotero citation types, kind of create this connection there. And it also maps each group of citation types, so all the journal articles, to an ILLiad doc type. So, article, book, chapter, standard, conference, proceeding, et cetera. And it maps it to a request type as well, right? Loaner article. And finally, it maps each group of citations to its own transaction template. So making sure that the book chapter request has all the fields that it needs. All the conference proceedings have all the fields that they need, where they need to go. And Kristen really wanted to call this out because we could see it being useful in other projects in the resource sharing space. And so anyone can download this mapping that Kristen and I created from GitHub. All right, so we made the script. We have a working product and we can start testing the service. It's really exciting. So first we wanted to drum up some business, but not too much because it was a pilot. We wanted to make sure it was going to be manageable. So we emailed our subject specialists, let them know they could talk about this in consultations and bring us projects that might be appropriate. And the first file that we put through the system as like a real world example was a scoping review from a librarian. And we've had other requests, more requests come in via librarian consultations and projects that they're collaborating on. That's kind of been the bulk of it. Many of the citation files that we've gotten during the pilot process were for large-scale literature reviews, scoping reviews, and a class project. But during this pilot phase, I realized that I really needed to have additional layers of review for the citations. So I created a process for us to review them additionally with ILL staff so that they could say, oh, yeah, there's no ISSNs in this file, or 80% of this is from a journal that we own, and the things that practitioners that are processing requests day to day are really going to hit on immediately. And so that's been a really valuable process. And it allows us to kind of front load some troubleshooting or think about data enhancements that we need. And of course, during the pilot phase, Kristen and I also worked to, iterate, to update the application, to fix bugs and add features that we needed. This, I will say, just was like my true appreciation of Kristen's brain. Like, it was just such a productive, fun, and professionally satisfying collaboration. And it's just, yeah, I'm really excited about it. our outreach efforts during the pilot phase were, pretty standard. We did emails, we created shareable documentation, not only for like slide presentations, but also for post consultation follow ups, because we realized that for systematic reviews, that's going to be probably the most important thing, because this all happens way down the line, right? So they're going to need something to remind them of this. We added information to our online systematic reviews guide. But the most important thing is we did individual meetings to check on our functionality, right? Are we going down the right path? Does this make sense? Is there anything additional that you all would need, right? How important is it for us to support, this systematic review platform? And I have been really kind of consistent about always mentioning this as one of our services. Like, oh yes, we do distance delivery and bulk ILL, right? We have all kinds of services for researchers. So that has been really helpful, and I think to keep us top of mind, I think. All right. So you're probably wondering, do they really get nice, clean, structured citations from researchers? No, we do not. No. Sometimes the data is messy. It's missing ISSNs. There's a spreadsheet with each citation just in one cell, unformatted on each line, and other missing data. I find the data cleaning like pretty fun, and I'm approaching it with an eye towards what in like a pilot mindset, what can we reasonably accommodate in order to be sustainable, and in order for us to scale the service. And so we're actually working on a new feature now that might help with this, that I'll talk about in a little bit. But I just wanted to share a couple of the data cleaning tools that I use. I mean, they're pretty standard, but some are it makes a nice pipeline. And any recommendations are welcome. So, Google Sheets tools like text to column can help separate data into distinct fields if needed. Regular expressions, I don't know how to describe it. I guess I would describe it as a data cleaning, data analysis language. It's a really excellent tool for moving from like that whole unformatted citation to separating it into individual comma separated fields like author, title, etc. And one really useful tool that I found was Crossref has a simple text query. You can just put in a title and then like an article title, maybe the author, other citation info, and it will find DOIs for you. It's just a text box, and then it gives you just text in return. And then if you just have a title and a DOI, you can use a DOI resolver. I use the ILLiad Decision Support Pipeline DOI resolver to pull in missing data. So if you just had a title and a DOI, you could actually pull in the ISSN this way, assuming that that's all included in their DOI that they minted. So again, this is a really good data cleaning pipeline, and I would rather take my time to do this and save my staff from having to, look up every ISSN individually. And of course, this doesn't always work perfectly because every messy data file is messy in its own special way. All right, so how are we doing at the end of the pilot? We had about 10 of these requests during the pilot phase, with an average of 100 citations per bulk ILL request. So that's me sending an email to my team saying, okay, I'm pressing the button. Please don't feel like you have to process all of these 100 requests right now, right? We can triage. Researchers have come from the College of Veterinary Medicine, education, management, psychology, and others. And we've been able to deepen our connections with our collections team to find the best way to acquire articles in those cases where, for example, they wanted, mostly articles from one journal published in the last 3 years, right? So thinking about our copyright fees and how we might manage that best. We've had great discussions with our subject specialists about integrations with the different platforms and our patron account. But most exciting to me is that we've added this to our website. I apologize for the weird skinny screenshot, but basically we add it to the website, and it links to a form where they can just send me their CSV or RIS file, which is really, really exciting. And so far, I think a couple people have used it since the beginning of the semester. All right, so you might be wondering, can I use this? Yes, you can. You definitely can. We would love to have other libraries play around with this and provide feedback. So here's the GitHub link. You will need some technology experience, but the GitHub repo contains a README that is really, really helpful, like really good documentation. And Kristen is more than happy to answer any questions if you run into trouble. Her email's on the last slide. And she kind of updated it so it's even more configurable for other libraries. You know, you're not kind of having to go deep into the code and take out all the NC State stuff. All right, so last, what else are we thinking for this project? There are a few new things that we think we can tackle. And we actually have a talented developer who recently graduated, and she's a temporary staff member in my department. So she's going to help us as a project, which I'm really excited about. Her name's Aditi. We'd like to use Crossref, and actually, instead of me going in and copying and pasting, to add that into the process to add DOIs to citations that don't have them. Crossref has an API that we can use. We'd like to look into citation transformation. So those lists of unformatted citations, can we turn these into structured data with a script? From what we've learned, there's a Ruby tool, a Ruby gem for this, but it's not Python, so it might be a bit challenging to cross streams, and we might end up with maybe like two separate scripts, one to make the citation look how we want it, and then the next to submit them into ILLiad, which I think would be fine and would be great progress. And we also just want to get more experience with real projects and expand awareness and really understand what's needed from our users for this tool. There are a few things that we are not pursuing right now. May not have mentioned, we're implementing Alma next year, and Kristen is leading that effort. So definitely glad we've reached a good stability point there, because it's going to have to take a back burner. So some things that we're not doing, we think the script meets the needs that we have. And so we're not trying to launch a web application, right? We're not going back to that user interface prototype. It just adds a ton of complexity and, security considerations that I just feel kind of unnecessary at the moment. We also aren't going to be allowing users to submit requests themselves. It's just, the data and everything can be really tricky. We just want to lay eyes on it. And we can always come back to these ideas in the future if things change. All right. That's it. Those are our emails. Let me know what questions you have.
I had to clap before starting my question. That was wonderful. Thank you, Mia. So this past 6 months, we received a request for 700 articles and in the Sotero, and they asked if we could get those in a week for them for their marketing project. So I was like, sorry, we don't do bulk ILL. I knew it was a thing, and it must have been a thing at their previous institution, but mostly we were worried about costs. I mean, the work, we could do the work, but yeah. Sometimes you might not be able to get everything for free from a partner, and they'd already gone through and matched up what we owned and got everything, and it was 700 after that process. So how would you scale that in terms of paying for articles that you might need to buy or pay for from other lenders?
Yeah, that's a great question. We haven't had to, well, I guess there was one situation we had where I kind of alluded to this, that a paid faculty member sent us a list of things they wanted, and it was like 50 articles from a single journal that were like 2 years old. And so we were going to end up having to pay copyright fees on all of it, except for like maybe 10 of those requests, hundreds of dollars. And so I funded that back to our collections team to really find a better solution for that patron. Like, can we maybe a year, price out a year of the journal or something like that. And so sometimes it does have to be a conversation and looking really in detail at the, at the citations, like how likely is it we're going to be able to get this through our Rapid ILL network. So with Rapid ILL, we get about 80% of our requests through that network. And so I could feel pretty confident that, if we have to get 20% of those, that's something that we're going to be able to kind of like wrap into our normal ILL budget. But I mean, yeah, for sure. It's something to kind of like dive into and look at. 700 is a lot. And I think there is a place for a conversation, like, what are we doing with this?
There was a conversation.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we answered this one. This, you mentioned that
Do you want the microphone?
Sorry. You mentioned that the original tool planned to check library databases, but the current one doesn't. Do you expect researchers to do some level of checking for owned items before moving to bulk requesting?
Great question. Rapid ILL does that for us. And so if there's something that we own, it will send it to a queue in ILLiad for owned locally, essentially, and then we go and download it. So I think it is a nice service for us to be able to do that for our researchers, because again, rather than having them make all those searches 2 times, essentially, that it's easy for us, it's part of our workflow. It doesn't it's a familiar kind of workflow for us to be able to do that. And so yeah, I mean, it's staff time, but I think it's a valuable researcher service for us to provide. But yes, Rapid will check those local holdings for us.
Hi, so really exciting development. I think I'm really excited to take a look at your GitHub and see what's going on. When I do bulk ILL lending for evidence synthesis, I take some steps to sort of short circuit parts of our process that result in a lot of emails going out to people, so that when I'm getting all those articles in, they're not getting like 180 individual emails for every article that they need. So is that something that you're doing in your institution, or do you feel like your users actually prefer to know exactly when they get every single article they've requested in bulk?
That's a great question. I would love to hear more about what you're doing to kind of circumnavigate that process. At this point, right, pilot mindset, they're getting every email, but hoping that they're threaded because they're have the same subject line more or less. And my advice to them is, I always tell them you can ignore the emails coming into your inbox and just go right to your patron account and download from there. And that way, they can just sort of filter those out as they want, and then use their patron account to download stuff. But I'd love to hear more about what you're doing.
Hi, so I'm gonna do maybe a kind of shameless self-plug here, but what you were talking about with Crossref and looking up DOIs, I've actually been involved in developing an add-on that you can find in the ILLiad add-on directory now with a couple of people. I'm at University of Albany in New York. I worked with a couple of other people to develop an add-on that monitors a queue and will search Crossref, and if it finds a matching article, we'll pull the DOI in automatically. And then from there, we send it to the decision support pipeline to clean things up. So if you're looking for a more automated way to do it, definitely check that add-on out.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a huge help for us. I've presented about it at other conferences, but not at this one. But it's been really helpful for automating a lot of that. And I don't know if you have libkey, but we got libkey in the last year or so or two. And so the libkey requires a DOI in order to match to something in our holdings. But so this DOI lookup pulls in the DOI for us if it's missing. And then if it's available through libkey, it sends them an email with the link to the article. So we've been able to automate requests in like as little as a minute, maybe less than that. It's been really helpful. So
That's
not
awesome.
a question, but
yeah, thank you for sharing. That's really cool. I'm definitely going to look into that, and everyone else should too.
DOI analyzer. It's called.
Online. ILLiad requests are on the requester account, but ILL staff does not deliver to user, upload to co-evidence instead.
So yes, the requests are placed on the user's account. It all gets delivered to the user as a normal ILL request. The earlier version of the tool would have let a user download all the PDFs at once so that they can upload them into Covidence, but we are not doing that, and that's not part of the tool anymore. So that was like a really, really early prototype, and I hope I didn't present that in a confusing way. But yes, all the requests are placed into the patron's account as normal, and then they can, do what they need to from there.
Does this work with EndNote? That is what many of the researchers use here.
Yes, it should work with EndNote. That was the first citation manager that we tested. Yeah, you'd want to test some of the citation type exports and the mapping, but it will export in RIS files, so there's no reason that would not work.
Okay. How large is your ILL staff? Can you hear that one, everyone?
She asked how large is the ILL staff. We have 4 full-time ILL staff, one of whom is a lending coordinator. So 3 full-time ILL borrowing and document delivery staff.
That's one. Back to the question.
On the hundreds of email questions, we find that some of our frequent flyers have email routing so that all of the things that come from us automatically go into their own folder.
Love that.
We do that for some of our frequent flyers on reply alls as well.
Questions? Oops, I just closed my phone on that. Is anyone else seeing any questions online? That was not smart. Oh, there we go. Here's one. One last question I think we have time for. My concern would be the work superseding traditional one at a time ILL requesting, follow up to the staff question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I try to time the submission of these requests at more of a low volume period. So Wednesday, Thursday afternoon has been a popular time. And I let my staff know in advance that I'm going to do this and who the user is, so that when they see those, they don't have heart palpitations, and also that they know that they can address other requests first, right? And that this user is not, sitting there waiting for a paper, to be written in 2 days for this article, right? So we triage those with that in mind, for sure. But also, there are some people that will just submit 50 ILL requests on their own on a Sunday, and we do the same thing for them. So it's just all kind of part of our triage process, but definitely something that we have thought through. And I worked with my team to kind of figure out what they want, when they want me to submit them, and make sure, that there's no undue stress on their part.
Mia, sorry, Jean, I have one more question. Have you looked at your stats to see what percentage of these articles are actually being accessed after you've borrowed them?
No. Yeah. No, I don't do that. Interesting question. Do you do that for other articles?
I have, yes.
Yeah.
I would be particularly interested in this situation to see what the cost benefit of all of the upfront effort would be. Just because that would play into my consideration at the end of the pilot, but I was just curious. Thanks.
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
Any more questions on the floor? I'm not seeing any more online. So we want to thank Mia for a very interesting and exciting tool for us. So thank you. And if you have more questions for her, of course, you can reach out to her through our conference site or email her. So thank you, Mia. And thank Kristen for us also.